since I posted, but I'm back and I should be posting weekly again. So yeah, so today's video is entitled "It's Not About You." So it's something that God in the past like week or so has really been screaming at me, and it was just very much something that I felt like needed to be shared. I felt as though God was really saying to me that all the things that He's calling me to, all the things that He's asking me to do in life, that I should stop making it all about me, that I should stop looking at me in the situation and focus on God in the situation. So, in terms of myself, for instance, with Fearlessly Faithful, you would have remembered I said it like in my earlier videos that it was never something I necessarily wanted to do. I never set out to, be a YouTuber or anything like that. But I really felt strongly as though God was saying, I want you to do this, I want you to put content out, etc., etc. So eventually I obeyed, I listened, and I started creating content. And it was always a case of I was just so aware that it was all God. It was all God. And it's not that I ever stopped being aware, but I think I fell into a trap that a lot of us fall into where we unintentionally stop making it about God and start making it about ourselves, in a sense of I think I don't know whether I just had an expectation of what I wanted, or it got to a point where I was like, I don't even know what to say anymore. What if I'm just repeating myself? What if, no one's even receiving it well, and then it's kind of like, is there any point? All of these things. And then it's kind of like, there was a little bit of discouragement where I was like, oh, is there any point putting anything out? Should I just stop? Blah, blah, blah. And I didn't even realize that like I was even thinking that deeply, until it was like God just said to me, it's not about you. It's not about you. I've told you to do this. I've told you the reason for this. So stop doubting me and just do what I've told you to do. And I was watching a preach yesterday, and that's like what smacked me, just slapped me in the face. And it was just talking about, in 2 Kings chapter 13, it talks about the story of Elisha and King Joash. So Elisha the prophet was dying, and King Joash, Elisha was a seer, so a lot of the victories that they had was won with God giving Elisha insight. And before Elisha died, King Joash, who he had just recently become king, he wanted Elisha to give him guidance. And in the story, it's basically like Elisha tells Joash, look out at the east window, strike an arrow. And then after that, he says to strike the ground. And King Joash strikes the ground 3 times, and then he stops. And Elisha's angry because Elisha said, I never told you to stop. So what God was really saying to me is like, I never told you to stop, so why stop? And I think a lot of us can do that, but it's a case of when we make it all about ourselves. Because if God has called us to something, anything, I don't know what it is for you, but for me, for instance, Fearlessly Faithful, God has called me to something. Once we start getting feelings of, I don't really want to do it, or I don't feel like I can do it, or what's the point of doing it? Once we have those ideas in our heads, those thoughts in our heads, it tends to be an indication that we're no longer making it about God. We're making it all about us. Because when, for instance, if I start to think like, oh, what's the point? Or I don't feel as though I can, but God has told me already that I can, then I'm being quite selfish, and I'm making it all about me and making it all about my wants, all about my needs, all about my expectations. But in doing something for God, in doing something that God has called me to, I've learned, or God has told me countless times in the past few days, that it's for a greater purpose. I wasn't called to release these videos for myself, for my satisfaction, or for any personal gain. God called me to release this video for a much greater purpose than myself. And I've just had to learn, and I've had to kind of just come back to God and say, God, I'm sorry, because you're right. This was never about me. This was always about you. And yeah, so that story where it's like God, Elisha never told King Joash to stop striking. And in the Bible it says that, you struck the ground 3 times, and now you're only gonna win the battle over your enemies 3 times. Whereas if you had continued to, you would have won 5, 6 times. And it really spoke to me, because I feel like for a lot of us, God is doing something in our lives, and it's easy for us to get discouraged or to quit prematurely because we don't feel as though there's any point in still, striking the ground, or we can't see the outcome, or we can't see the end goal, and it just seems as though it's pointless, or we're not qualified enough, or it's just not what I had in mind. But it's just so important to fix our focus on God, and to know that God is the one who started it. It says that in the Bible that he who started a good work will be faithful to bring it to completion. And I really felt compelled to do this video, because I feel as though there's loads of us where God is calling us to something. It might not even necessarily be a calling thing. It might be a thing of God has given us a command to do something, and we don't want to do it, or we don't see the point of doing it, or we just feel as though we can't do like that specific command that God is telling us. And so we kind of we hear him, but then we don't, you know, um, do what he's telling us to do. And I just think that it's so important that when God gives us a command, to carry it through and to take ourselves out of it, because at the end of the day, he knows the greater plan, he knows the greater purpose. And I just think that an important thing in that is, like, if God has called you to something, it's just to continually commit it to God, because at the end of the day, the path is never going to be easy. We're always going to face obstacles. There's always going to be bumps in the road. And then when those obstacles and those bumps in the road come, that's when it's the easiest time for us to make it about ourselves, because we, in those moments, it's easy to forget God in the situation, forget that God is in the situation, forget that God called us to the situation, and then to look at our own strength, to look at our own power, and to decide that, you know, I can't do it in my own strength, I can't do it based on my own, on my mindset. But it's always important to continually commit to God, continually pray that God will be in it, continually pray for wisdom, for guidance. For myself, I think I was kind of like, I don't know what content to put out. I don't know like what direction to go in. And what I really felt God was telling me to do was, open books. Open books that you've got on your shelf. Listen to preachers, read my words, and in those things I will reveal it to you. Um, so yeah, it was just continually seeking God, continually putting it into prayer, continually just asking for wisdom and asking for guidance. And in that, God will show you all that you need in order to do what he's called you to do. Because at the end of the day, God is a God of action. If I God gave me the vision, God gave me the God told me to start Fearlessly Faithful, but at the end of the day, if I don't film videos, there's no content that's coming out. And it's just important to not stop, to not give up. And I think it's really easy, especially I think, especially if it's something like ministry wise, that is different to, I don't know, the job that you may work, and it just you don't necessarily see alignment, or you might not even necessarily see it as being important. It's really easy to just sideline it and say, do you know what, I tried, um and I gave it a good go, but I don't think it's for me. When that mindset of I don't think it's for me comes in, yeah, it's an indication that you think it's about you. But really, God wants you to know it's not about you. It's about something a lot greater than you. And even if you don't necessarily benefit from it, there is somebody out there that is going to benefit from it. And it's being a good keeper, and being God has given us all talents. We know the story of, the parable of the talents, where, God, a master gave his servants, one servant 5 talents, one servant 3 talents, and one servant 1 talent. And the The servant with the 5 talents came back with another 5 talents. The servant with 3 talents came back with another 3 talents. But the servant with 1 talent decided to bury it and said that, the master's an evil master who reaps what he did not sow. So he just buried it and he didn't do anything with the 1 talent. And it's just important that we are people we're like the 5 talent people, the 3 talent people, because when God has put us over something, when God has given us something, if we're faithful over the little, then he'll trust us with more. And it's important that when we're called to something, that we are faithful with that little. So it's just important, whatever gift, whatever talent, whatever calling that you have, whatever it is that God has placed in your lap, I just encourage you to remember to not make it about you, to not think about what you can gain, to not think about how it's benefiting you necessarily, because what God has put in your lap may not be for your benefit. It may be for somebody else's benefit. But if you keep it to yourself, if you keep it hidden, you've not done what God has called you to do. So yeah, that's my quick encouragement for you guys. It's something that was really on my heart, and I really hope that blesses someone and that encourages someone. Maybe if you've stopped something that God has called you to start again, if you've kind of let something plateau and God is wanting to like rev it up and start, then go for it. And even if it's something that God wants you to start and you just you don't think you can, you don't think you have the time for it, all of these things, that the only reason that you're not doing it is because you've made it about yourself. I just encourage you guys, remember who it's for, remember the God that called you, and just do it. Just do it and see how God will glorify it, see how God will help you through it, because at the end of the day, none of us are alone. In this walk, we have a God, we have a faithful God, we have a God who has gone before us. He's ordered our steps, so we just have to trust him and just trust the process, because at the end of the day, everything is a process. Nothing really happens overnight. We can't see the final outcome, but we know that God has the victory. He's always had the victory. So yeah, just trust him. And yeah, it was great being back, and I shall see you guys in the next video very, very soon. Like, comment, subscribe, share, and yeah, I'll see you guys next week probably. Take care. So God gives us instruction. God tells us what to do. God tells us how best to lay our foundation.